The Omen MAX 16 is HP's most powerful gaming laptop yet. You can spec it from RTX 5060 right up to RTX 5090 graphics, so something for everyone. It's got a beautiful OLED screen and more performance tuning options than ever before, plus new RGB lighting for maximum gaming power.
Obviously.
But don't get too excited just yet. We ran into some unexpected issues you'll want to know about before buying. The Omen is available in shadow black or ceramic white finishes. Take a wild guess at which one I've got. HP says this is their first gaming laptop with an RGB light bar. I think it looks better than light bars found in MSI or Gigabyte laptops with a clean diffused look. Build quality is decent and the metal finish looks nice and clean. There's only minor keyboard flex. It feels quite sturdy even when pushing hard, but the screen wobbles more than I'd like. All it takes is a small desk bump or aggressively typed email and you'll notice it. The hinges felt nice and smooth otherwise, and it's easy to open with one finger. It's a fairly standard size for a powerful 16-inch gaming laptop without being too thick. The laptop itself weighs in at almost 6.2 pounds or 2.8 kilos, increasing to 8.2 pounds or 3.7 kilos with a 330-watt charger included. This makes it the heaviest 16-inch gaming laptop that we've tested in the last couple of years, but basically the same as Asus's Scar 16 that we reviewed last week. The Omen is a bit lighter than some of the other 16-inch models with the charger included, as the Omen's charger isn't quite as heavy as some of those others. My configuration has Intel's Core Ultra 9 275HX processor, Nvidia's RTX 5080 graphics, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 16-inch QHD Plus 240Hz OLED screen. But the price will change a lot depending on how you configure it with the link below. And if it has a good sale, we'll have it listed on our gaminglaptop.deals website so you can get it at the best price. The keyboard has per-key RGB backlighting with HP's unique pudding keycap design, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. Key brightness can be adjusted between two levels or turned off with the function and F4 shortcut. Holding function shows us the keys we can interact with, and you can press 1 or 2 to cycle through a bunch of different lighting effects for both the keyboard and front light bar. The Omen Gaming Hub software, the control panel for the laptop, gives you more customization over the 10 lighting effects, including direction and speed of effects, and you can control the keyboard and light bar separately or link them to the same effect. There's also the Light Studio software, which takes things further and lets you control brightness in 1% increments. The keyboard feels nice to type on. I'd describe the presses as having a subtle click. The only thing I didn't like was the smaller up and down arrow keys. The touchpad worked alright, but the click feels a bit clunky. It clicks down anywhere, but is harder to press towards the top. The port layout is decent. Not much on the left or right will get in the way of your mouse hand, but having a Type-C port on each side would have been nicer. Most ports are on the back, so cables stay out of the way. The power plug is a bit annoying. It doesn't really clip into place, so if you move the laptop, it's easy for the cable to come out only a couple of millimeters, which is enough to stop it charging. Both Type-C ports can be used to charge the laptop with up to 100 watts, and they both have DisplayPort 1.4 support for connecting monitors. But for the best FPS in games, you'll want to connect HDMI to the back, as that's the only display output that connects directly to the Nvidia graphics. Both Type-C ports go through the Intel integrated graphics first before getting to the Nvidia graphics, at least when Optimus is on. If you turn Optimus off in the BIOS, then both Type-C ports don't have any display output. Getting inside only requires taking out 6 Phillips head screws. The 2 down the front are shorter than the rest, and one in the back doesn't come out and instead lifts the bottom panel up, making it easy to get in with pry tools. I'll leave a link to the ones I use below. Inside we've got the battery down the front, 2 memory slots underneath this cover towards the middle, and 2 M.2 storage slots to the right of that. If you ever want to upgrade the SSD it comes with, prepare for a bit of hassle. On higher end models with 5070 Ti or above graphics like mine, you'll need to remove the cooler just to reach the drive, as its cover is soldered to a heat pipe. This design choice is questionable to me. The heat pipe that's soldered to the SSD cover goes above the CPU. Now, I'm no thermal engineer or anything, but I'd have to imagine that the CPU is more likely to generate more heat than the SSD. So rather than this design keeping the SSD cool, I can only imagine that it would make it warmer by taking heat from the CPU. On the 5070 and below versions, you can apparently get the drive out with tweezers, which still isn't ideal, but at least you don't have to remove the cooler. The speeds from the 2TB PCIe Gen 4 SSD are excellent, and most people would probably only add a second SSD rather than swapping the one it comes with, as that would require reinstalling the operating system. At least one of the slots supports faster Gen 5, but I couldn't see which in the documentation. The documentation shows that Wi-Fi is upgradable, but again, you've got to remove the cooler to get to it, and that would require a repaste, which is pretty extreme for what's normally an easy change in other laptops, especially considering doing so would remove HP's liquid metal. Fortunately, the Wi-Fi 7 card that it comes with is already quite good, so you probably won't need to swap it out anytime soon. That said, by default, it comes with an older 6E card. Personally, I'd pay the $10 upgrade for Wi-Fi 7 just so I never have to deal with upgrading it later. I took off half a point from the upgradability score for the covered Wi-Fi, and the same for the covered SSD. I figure it still gets half a point for each, as it's better than not having them at all. I also confirmed the secondary M.2 slot that I could access could fit a drive with double-sided chips, but I wasn't able to access the primary slot to check. The Omen's dual speakers are found underneath on the left and right sides towards the front. They sound pretty good, clear with some bass, but there was some vibration in the wrist rest area. The Latencymon results were bad in our 5-minute idle test. The Omen is powered by a 6-cell 83Wh battery. Battery life could be better if the display supported a dynamic refresh rate, but it's locked at 240Hz, so you can't drop it down to 60Hz to save power. And that's despite HP's own product page claiming it does support dynamic refresh rate to improve battery life. It's possible it just doesn't work with the OLED screen option. It is possible to limit the maximum charge level of the battery to 80% to help improve longevity, but I could only find it through the BIOS, not software, so it's just harder to access compared to other laptops. You can use the software to disable the Nvidia graphics and only use the Intel integrated graphics to help save power, but that needs a reboot. Battery life was fairly average, lasting for just over 5 hours in our YouTube video playback test. Very similar to Asus's SCAR 16 we covered last week, despite having a bigger battery. HP's thinner Omen Transcend 16 lasted longer, but it also has a bigger battery. The Omen lost 16% of its battery while asleep for 24 hours. But this isn't a fair comparison with the other laptops, as it depends on the size of the laptop's battery. Here's how much battery power was lost on average per hour, but it was still the lowest result we've seen from an Intel-based laptop so far. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a vapor chamber cooler with HP's Omen Cryo compound on both, which they say is a liquid metal hybrid. There are 2 fans, and despite the whole back of the bottom panel looking like mesh, air only comes in directly to the fans. There are additional air vents above the keyboard. Air gets exhausted out from both sides towards the back, and out the back towards the corners. HP's Omen Gaming Hub software allows us to change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are Eco, Balanced, Performance, and Unleashed. In all modes except Eco, you can set the fans to max speed. Performance mode also has the power settings tab, allowing you to enable smart performance gain, which basically increases the maximum power limit shared by the CPU and GPU. But increasing the power usage may result in battery drain depending on the workload, so you can also configure how much battery drain you're happy to lose with the charger plugged in exchange for extra performance. You can also swap between the performance modes with the Function plus P shortcut. If you want to squeeze out every last frame from the laptop, then the new Unleashed mode is for you. It gives you more control over power and temperatures. Just expect more heat and noise if you're maxing it out like we've done. The Advanced Performance tab also lets you overclock the CPU and GPU, but we haven't tested any of this because results will vary between each laptop anyway. HP designed the fans with Intel to clean themselves automatically, so in theory you don't have to worry about dust hurting your performance over time. Basically, the fans spin in reverse to blow dust out when you're not actively gaming, hence the negative RPM numbers. It's scheduled, but you can also run it manually anytime or disable it. The internal temperatures were cool at idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests which aim to represent a worst-case full-load scenario, and in performance and unleashed modes, both the CPU and GPU were thermal throttling. It's been a while since I've seen a gaming laptop thermal throttle in these tests, but it may not necessarily be a bad thing if the result is great performance. Even the cooling pad I test with, linked below, wasn't able to help lower temperatures, but setting the fans to max speed did at least stop the GPU throttling. Though of course, it's also louder like this too, as you'll hear soon. It was possible to lower the temps by maxing out my cooling pad and the laptop's fans, but that's insanely loud. The GPU was able to run close to 170 watts in unleashed mode. Impressive stuff, considering the CPU is close to 90 watts too. Nvidia's control panel says the 5080 can get up to 175 watts with dynamic boost, so the fact that we're seeing this much with the CPU also loaded up is a good result. Basically, the more we improve cooling, the more power the laptop attempts to use, giving us better performance. Now, to be fair, that's just the way I stress test laptops. We max out all the power sliders and see what they can do. You can absolutely use the power and temperature limits in unleashed mode to cap thermals to something lower that you're more comfortable with. And that will avoid thermal throttling. You'll just be power limit throttling instead, and missing out on some extra performance. But that might be for the best, because this laptop turned off about 3 times while I was running those stress tests. Though it only seemed to happen when I had the cooling pad set to 1400 RPM. It didn't turn off in any other test, it was only specifically that one. So I don't know, bit strange, maybe it was getting too much air and trying to use too much power? At least that's what I originally thought, but I also tested the cooling pad maxed out at 2800 RPM, so double the speed, and I didn't have any issues there. Potentially, the faster cooler speed was doing a better job of keeping it cool and stopping it from hitting thermal limits and turning off. But yeah, I did see spikes of up to 105 degrees Celsius in some of the stress tests. Unfortunately, there wasn't any information in the logs about it. It just showed as an unexpected shutdown. Here's how FPS looks in an actual game with the different performance modes in use. I've got the native results without upscaling shown in purple, and a demonstration of the performance improvement that's possible by setting DLSS 4 to balanced in red. Using unleashed mode wasn't really any better than performance mode. It's more about having granular control to tweak it how you like. Even Eco mode was able to run the game at 2560 by 1600 ultra settings above 60 FPS without upscaling, so you can still play with less fan noise too. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench, where the GPU is idle. Performance mode was the best, with Unleashed actually coming in slightly behind, even with all the power sliders maxed out. It's a great result when compared to most other laptops that we've tested. Only other laptops with the same 275HX processor are nearby, or a liquid-cooled 14900HX from last gen if you want to count that. Performance lowers if we unplug the charger and instead run off of battery power, but the Omen doesn't lose too much performance here. That said, while using it on battery, I did notice occasional random stuttering despite the relatively high single-core score seen here. As for keyboard temps, most laptops I test are in the low 30 degrees Celsius range on the keyboard at idle, but the Omen was below this and cool. It's not too bad with the CPU and GPU stress test running, regardless of the performance mode used. The rest stays cold, the WASD area is a bit warm, the middle is warmer, and the back is hot, but you don't need to touch there. The hottest point of the keyboard in performance mode with smart mode maxed out wasn't too bad compared to most other laptops tested. No problems there. But let's find out if the fans get too loud to keep it in check. The fans were slightly audible when doing nothing at idle, but that's likely due to this option in the BIOS that's on by default, so you could disable that for a quieter laptop. It just might get a bit warmer. Otherwise, fan noise wasn't too bad when compared to most other gaming laptops tested, at least when sticking to reasonable modes and not maxing out the fans. It's actually slightly quieter compared to their lower powered but thinner Omen Transcend 16. Alright, let's move over to the screen. The Omen is available with 3 different different screen options at different prices, but I've got the top-end OLED panel in mine, so expect lower results from the others. OLED means super high color gamut, as you'd expect, but Delta E color accuracy being above 3 isn't ideal for creators. Brightness maxed out at around 400 nits, and wasn't really that different with HDR on or off. So a bit below HP's claimed 500 nits on HDR. But this type of thing will always vary a bit between panels. Screen brightness was fairly average when compared to other OLED laptops that we've tested. If you want something super bright, you've got to go for mini LED instead. As is the case with all OLED panels, just be aware that the glossy finish means reflections might be annoying if you're using it in a bright environment. And like other OLED panels, PWM is used to adjust brightness, which may be annoying for some. We didn't see any options in the software that sound like they're for reducing the potential of OLED screen burn-in, so I'm not sure how HP are handling that. I think a number of modern panels have mitigations built in, so they might just be going with that. Average greater gray screen response time was excellent, half a millisecond. Just like other OLED panels that we've tested, they're all significantly faster compared to any other panel technology out there, and great for competitive players. The total system latency is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire appears on the screen in Counter-Strike 2, and the Omen is one of the fastest results compared to most other laptops tested, so again, great for competitive players. The Omen has advanced Optimus, so you can swap between Optimus on or off without rebooting to get optimal game performance. It's also got a traditional mux switch, but that's only available through the BIOS, so you have to reboot. It's also kinda useless because it doesn't change which GPU the ports connect to. G-Sync is only available when Optimus is off, but Adaptive Sync is available from the integrated graphics when Optimus is on, so either way you get tear-free gameplay. The camera above the screen is 1080p, it's got IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock, and it's got a physically sliding privacy shutter. Alright, let's find out what HP's Omen MAX 16 can do in games. We've tested it in 3 games with and without ray tracing at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K resolutions. Cyberpunk 2077 was tested with the game's benchmark, and for the most part, the Omen with RTX 5080 graphics was only a little behind 3 other laptops with the more powerful RTX 5090 graphics. And that's at all 3 resolutions tested. With the ray tracing ultra preset enabled, the Omen was consistently beaten by the RTX 4090 in Alienware's bigger M18 at all 3 resolutions, while usually only being a few FPS ahead of the last-gen RTX 4080 in Lenovo's Legion Pro 7i. Black Myth Wukong was also tested with the game's benchmark, and again, the Omen was beaten by most of the 5090 laptops, but it's really not much of a difference considering the 5090 is often $500 plus more expensive. The ray tracing on results are really making me see that these new RTX 50 series laptops seem to have significantly better 1% lows than last gen, which means less dips in performance. Alan Wake 2 ran 5 to 10% better with the 5080 Omen compared to the 4080 Legion, and again, the more expensive 5090 laptops don't really have that much of a lead, and that's the case whether we're testing with or without ray tracing. I need to mention that we had a few game crashes during testing, but I can't say if that's an issue specific to the Omen or Nvidia, as Nvidia have frequently been putting out driver updates to address all sorts of instability with the RTX 50 series. So presumably that would improve over time, and hopefully our experience wouldn't be the norm going forward. Here are the 3D Mark results. Content creator results were good. Adobe Premiere was only behind higher spec laptops, though Adobe Photoshop was behind many last-gen options. Unfortunately, the DaVinci Resolve test kept crashing, which also happened on the SCAR 16. The BIOS is simple and gets the job done, and includes some rare options like always-on fan control and keyboard backlight timeout. Linux support was excellent overall. Everything we test worked except 6 GHz on the Wi-Fi 7 card, which likely just needs a driver. Pricing and availability will change over time, so check the link below the video for updates and current sales. And if the Omen has a good sale, we'll add it to our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that every day to include all of the latest sales, so make sure that you check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop. At the time of recording in early May, the Omen MAX 16 starts from $2,500 US with RTX 5070 Ti graphics. The 5060 was only just announced and pricing isn't up yet. You can customize the laptop quite a bit on HP's website, but ultimately for the RTX RTX 5080 configuration we've looked at in this video, it's more like $3,600, which is very expensive. But Best Buy actually have a similar configuration for almost $600 less. So no point buying from HP directly unless there's a good sale. Even so, if we consider the fact that the RTX 5080 graphics in this laptop was performing similarly to an RTX 4090 laptop from last gen, and that good 4090 laptops have been available from $2,000 to $2,500, it just makes the 5080 config feel overpriced. But I guess that's just the way it goes with a new launch. 40 series was crazy expensive at launch too, and then prices came down over time. So you'll have to check for pricing updates with those links below. So then, is HP's Omen MAX 16 worth considering? Let's break it down. Performance is great, the OLED screen looks fantastic, and HP's software now gives you more control over performance with more tuning than ever before. I also like the clean design and lighting, though that part is personal preference. I know some people really don't like the pudding keycap design, but I think it's different and looks kinda cool. Unfortunately, this is one of the heaviest 16-inch gaming laptops that we've ever tested, and despite the extra weight, it's still thermal throttled under heavy load. To be fair, you can at least customize the power and temperature limits to find a balance. You just have the option of pushing performance further at the expense of higher temps and fair noise, which personally I think is nice to have. You don't have to do it, but it's there if you do want it. I don't know, complaining about the temperatures on this thing kind of feels equivalent to getting in a car and revving the engine till it blows, then acting surprised. That said, running it maxed out might not be the best idea, as we did have a few random shutdowns during our stress tests, but that was with a cooling pad, so potentially it was because the laptop was getting more air, and as soon as it identifies that it's got better cooling, it starts using more power, and more power equals more heat, but also more performance. But still, randomly switching off during a heavy load just isn't something I've seen from any other gaming laptop in the last couple of years. So if you are planning on pushing it to the max, that's worth thinking about. And upgrades are another downside. Accessing the primary SSD and Wi-Fi card means taking off the cooler. It's definitely doable, but more work than most other laptops. And the screen wobble is also just a bit too much for me. If you're after high-end performance but don't necessarily need an OLED display, then Asus's Scar 16 with mini LED screen might be worth considering. It runs cooler and performs better. And you can check out my review over here. I'll see you in that one next.